The late afternoon sun bled through the pine trees surrounding the Eagle Wing training arena on Pine Ridge Reservation, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Chief John Running Eagle stood center ring, arms raised like a medicine man at prayer. His ceremonial beads caught the light, and the lines on his weathered face deepened under the weight of what he was about to offer. Beside him, a massive German shepherd, midnight black with a slash of white across his chest, paced violently, yellow eyes wild with mistrust. The air grew tight with tension as onlookers fell silent. Shadow was his name, a beast too dangerous for handlers, too wild for any trainer, a walking legend of bitten arms and ruined careers. "This animal served our country," John announced, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "I ain't charging a cent, but I'll lay down a challenge. 5 minutes with him following your command, and Shadow is yours. But don't fool yourselves. This ain't just a dog. He's a storm wrapped in fur." The audience shifted uneasily. Whispers and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. They'd seen what Shadow did last spring. 3 handlers hospitalized, one with severed tendons. Then the silence cracked, soft but sharp. From the crowd, a young woman stepped forward. Her combat boots stirred the dust as she moved. She wore faded military fatigues, her black hair pulled tight beneath a red bandana. Her name wasn't known to anyone present, but the moment her eyes met Shadow's, the mood shifted. There was stillness, like the calm before lightning strikes earth. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Pine Ridge Reservation sprawled across the South Dakota landscape like a forgotten quilt, patches of pine forest stitched together with meadows and streams, once vast, now reduced to a shadow of its former glory. The land remained home to the proud Lakota people who had known both prosperity and hardship across generations. At its heart stood the Eagle Wing Training Center, where for generations the Lakota had raised and trained working dogs for police, rescue, and military use. What had begun as necessity had become tradition, then industry, then struggle, as funding dwindled and younger tribal members sought opportunities elsewhere. Chief John Running Eagle had led both tribe and center for 20 years. His authority was as unquestioned as the Black Hills themselves. At 65, his face held the geography of his ancestors. High cheekbones, hawk-like nose, deep-set eyes that missed nothing. John had served 2 tours in Vietnam before returning to the reservation, bringing military discipline to traditional ways. His silver hair, always braided, hung to the middle of his back, moving like a pendulum when he walked among the kennels each morning at dawn. Few remembered the younger John, the one who had once fallen desperately in love with a white emergency medic after she pulled him from a mountain crevasse during a blizzard. Fewer still knew about Sarah Whitefeather, or the child she had carried alone when John chose tribe over heart. The woman who now stood facing Shadow was that child, Olivia Whitefeather, 28 years old, with her father's black hair and her mother's green eyes. She carried herself with military precision. 3 years in Afghanistan had left her with a purple heart, a medical discharge, and nightmares that medication couldn't touch. The scar along her jawline was still pink, newer than the one she carried inside. She had come not just to confront the father who abandoned her, but to reclaim the one soul who understood her darkness. The dog that had once been her partner in war, Michael Running Eagle, watched from the edge of the ring, his brother's shadow in more ways than one. Where John held to tradition, Michael had embraced progress, always pushing for development. for deals with outside interests. At 58, his ambition had not dimmed, merely simmered, waiting. To him, Olivia wasn't just an unwelcome niece. She was a threat to everything he had patiently waited to inherit. Shadow recognized something in the woman. His ears twitched forward, his posture shifting from aggression to alertness. Everyone saw it. No one understood it. The crowd held its collective breath as Olivia stepped into the ring. Olivia's movements were deliberate, measured, the walk of someone who calculated risk with every step. Shadow's ears remained forward, his body still but attentive, like a loaded weapon waiting for the trigger to be pulled. Chief Running Eagle's hand instinctively moved to the whistle around his neck, ready to call off his demonstration if the dog lunged. "Miss, this isn't wise," John warned, his gravelly voice carrying across the sudden silence. "This animal has PTSD worse than most veterans I know. He doesn't respond to strangers." Olivia didn't look at John. Her gaze remained locked on Shadow, unwavering. "He's not a stranger to me. Chief Running Eagle," she responded, loud enough for the first rows to hear. The way she emphasized his name carried weight beyond respect. It held accusation. John narrowed his eyes, studying the young woman more carefully now. Something in her features tugged at his memory, the slope of her cheekbones, the set of her jaw, but he pushed the thought away. This was about the demonstration, about proving no one could handle Shadow except him. "Your name, Miss?" he asked, more ceremonial than curious. "Sergeant Olivia Whitefeather, 75th Ranger Regiment, retired." She still hadn't broken her gaze with Shadow. "And this is Sergeant Shadow, military working dog. Identification number K435. A murmur rippled through the crowd. John felt his mouth go dry, his hand dropping from the whistle. The name Whitefeather hit him like a physical blow. Around the arena, elders exchanged glances, and Michael Running Eagle pushed away from the fence, suddenly alert to potential trouble. "That's impossible," John finally managed. "This dog came from Bagram Air Base," Olivia finished. "3rd Battalion, my unit." She finally turned to face John directly. "You knew exactly who he was when you bought him, just like you knew exactly who I was when my mother wrote to tell you she was pregnant 28 years ago." The crowd's murmur became a buzz of whispers and questions. John Running Eagle, respected chief and elder, stood motionless, his carefully constructed world tilting beneath him. Michael moved toward the center ring, his presence spreading like oil on water. "This is inappropriate," Michael announced sharply. "We're here for a demonstration, not personal matters." Olivia ignored him, taking another step toward Shadow. The dog's tail moved once. Not a wag, but an acknowledgement. When she extended her hand, palm down in the universal military signal for hold. Shadow's posture changed instantly. He sat, alert but calm, as if a switch had been flipped. "That," she whispered, "the Lakota word for wait." Shadow didn't move. The crowd grew silent again, witnessing something they couldn't quite comprehend. The dangerous, unpredictable animal was now sitting perfectly still, focused entirely on this stranger who was somehow not a stranger at all. John felt his chest tighten. Only someone who had worked extensively with Shadow would know his commands. Only someone from his military past would know how to approach him. And the name Whitefeather. There was only one possibility, one truth he'd spent 28 years avoiding. "Clear the arena!" he ordered suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. Everyone except Miss Whitefeather. "Thomas," Michael began, his tone warning. "Now, Michael, It wasn't a request. It was a chief giving an order. People began to exit slowly, reluctantly, sensing they were witnessing something momentous but private. Michael remained, arms crossed, his expression thunderous with disapproval and calculation. When the last spectator had cleared the training ring, John faced Olivia directly. "You have 3 minutes to explain why you're here before I have you escorted off tribal land." Olivia's laugh was cold, brittle. "That's rich coming from you. 28 years of silence. And now you're giving me 3 minutes. I'm not here for you. Chief, I'm here for him." She nodded toward Shadow. "My partner, my dog. This animal is tribal property, purchased legally." John countered, his voice carefully controlled despite the hurricane building inside him. "Using what money?" "The money you never sent to my mother when she was working 3 jobs to raise your daughter." The words emerged like bullets, precise and targeted. "Or maybe some of the money she spent on my college that should have gone to her cancer treatments." John froze, his composure cracking visibly. "Cancer. 6 months to live, they say. Maybe less." Olivia's voice softened just slightly. "That's why I'm here. She wanted me to find you before she—" She swallowed hard. "She wanted closure. I just wanted my dog back." Shadow whined softly, sensing the emotional current between them. Michael stepped forward, inserting himself physically between John and Olivia. "This spectacle is best handled privately," he hissed to his brother. "The council will hear about this. John." The tribal council meeting hall sat empty except for John and Olivia, their silhouettes sharp against the late afternoon light streaming through high windows. Shadow lay at Olivia's feet, his eyes never leaving her face. The dog's loyalty was undeniable, a stark contrast to the fractured human relationship unfolding in the sacred space. "I don't know what you want from me," John finally said, breaking the tense silence. His voice had lost its public authority, revealing something raw underneath. "If it's money—" "I don't want your money," Olivia cut in. "I never did, neither did my mother." John paced the worn floorboards, his footsteps echoing. "Then why come now, after all these years?" "I told you, Mom is dying." Olivia's voice caught slightly. "And Shadow recognized me on the television when they did that piece about wounded warriors last month. You saw it too, didn't you? That's why you suddenly acquired him and brought him here." John stopped pacing. The accusation hung between them, impossible to deny without outright lying. When he'd seen the news segment featuring veterans with PTSD, he'd recognized her immediately. Sarah's eyes, his own stubborn jaw, his daughter in military fatigues, describing the ambush that had killed 3 of her teammates and left her and her military working dog with invisible wounds. He'd made calls the next day, pulling strings, paying triple what the Pentagon asked for the damn dog they could no longer use. "I didn't know how to reach you," he admitted finally. "You never tried." Olivia's voice was flat, emotionless. 28 years, and you never once tried." Before John could respond, the meeting hall door burst open. Michael entered, followed by 2 tribal police officers and a stern-looking woman in her 80s. "Grace, many horses," John acknowledged, the eldest council member. "This woman needs to be removed from tribal property," Michael announced, his voice carrying an authority he hadn't earned. "She's making unfounded claims and disrupting—" "She's my daughter, Michael." John's words fell like stones into still water. The room went silent. Grace, many horses stepped forward, her ancient eyes moving from John to Olivia and back again. "Sarah Whitefeather's child?" she asked softly. John nodded at once, unable to meet her gaze. "Then she is Running Eagle by blood, and no one will remove her from tribal land," Grace declared, her voice broking no argument. She turned to Michael, whose face had darkened with barely controlled rage. "Leave us." Michael hesitated, then stormed out, the tribal officers following uncertainly behind him. Grace approached Olivia slowly, studying her face with the intensity of someone reading ancient text. "You have your grandmother's spirit in your eyes," she said finally. "Strong women in the Running Eagle line, even when the men forget their way." She shot John a withering look before turning back to Olivia. "Why have you come, daughter of Sarah?" "For him." Olivia nodded toward Shadow, who had risen to stand protectively at her side. "And because my mother is dying." Olivia's composure wavered. She wanted to make peace before she goes." Grace nodded slowly, then reached out and took Olivia's hand between her weathered palms. "There are many kinds of peace, child. Some we make with others, some we make with ourselves." She released Olivia's hand and turned to John. "You have walked in shadows too long. Nephew, the time for truth has come." With that pronouncement, Grace left them alone once more, the door closing softly behind her. John moved to the window, staring out at the hills that had cradled his people for generations. "Your mother saved my life," he said softly. "Did she ever tell you that—" "She told me everything," Olivia replied. "The blizzard, the mountain rescue, how you promised to build a life with her." A pause. "How the council threatened to remove you as future chief if you married outside the tribe." John turned sharply. "That's not—" "She found the letters. Chief Running Eagle. The ones from your father warning you what would happen if you chose her." John closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of decades of silence. When he opened them again, he looked older, more vulnerable. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I convinced myself I was protecting the tribe, honoring my father's wishes, but I was just afraid." Olivia didn't respond immediately. Shadow whined softly, pressing against her leg as if sensing her distress. She absently stroked the dog's head, finding comfort in the familiar texture of his fur. "I thought about her every day," John continued, the words barely audible. "I thought about you both every single day." A commotion outside broke the moment, raised voices, the slam of a truck door. John moved quickly to the window. "Michael," he muttered. "He's gathering people." Olivia stood instantly alert, military training evident in her posture. "What's happening?" "Politics," John said grimly. "My brother has wanted my position for decades. He's using this situation to finally make his move." Through the window, they could see Michael gesturing forcefully, surrounded by a growing crowd of tribal members. His voice carried faintly, "Harboring outsiders, keeping secrets, unfit to lead." John turned to Olivia, decision hardening his features. "I can't give you back 28 years. I can't undo what I did to your mother. But I can protect you now." He moved toward the door, then paused. "That dog, Shadow, he was more than your partner, wasn't he?" Olivia's face softened, looking at the German shepherd. "He saved my life in Kandahar, pulled me behind cover when the ambush hit, lost part of his ear doing it." She touched the scar along her jaw. We came home with the same wounds, just different kinds. John nodded slowly, understanding flowing between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. "Stay here," he said. "I need to address the tribe." As he opened the door to face the gathering storm outside, Shadow moved to stand between Olivia and the potential threat, loyal, protective, unwavering in his devotion, everything John had failed to be. The days following Olivia's confrontation with John settled into an uneasy routine, while Michael continued to stir discontent among some tribal members. John had effectively silenced the immediate crisis by acknowledging Olivia as his blood. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet, but it was enough to establish her right to remain on reservation land. Olivia took a small cabin near the training center, her sparse belongings barely filling the modest space. Shadow never left her side, his presence a constant reminder of the bond they'd forged in war and carried home in peace. Each morning they walked the perimeter of the property together, the air crisp with pine and possibility. John watched from a distance, uncertain how to bridge the chasm of years. He noted how she moved, the military precision in her gait, the watchful assessment of her surroundings, and saw echoes of himself, painful reminders of shared blood and separate lives. By the third day, Olivia began helping at the training center. Without formal invitation or announcement, she simply appeared at the kennels at dawn, Shadow at her heel, and began working with the problem cases, dogs too traumatized or aggressive for regular handlers. "She has a gift," Ben Black Wolf, the center's senior trainer, told John as they observed Olivia calming a particularly anxious Belgian Malinois. "Those dogs respond to her like she speaks their language." John nodded, a complicated pride swelling in his chest. "Her grandmother was the same way," he said quietly. "My mother could gentle any animal that walked or crawled." Ben glanced sideways at his chief. "Blood tells, even when we try to deny it." The comment stung. As Ben had surely intended, John walked away without responding, retreating to his office, where paperwork offered a convenient escape from uncomfortable truths. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived with an envelope addressed to Olivia. John recognized the handwriting immediately. Sarah's delicate script, unchanged after all these years. His heart contracted painfully at the sight. He sent a young staff member to deliver it to Olivia's cabin, then returned to staring blankly at budget reports that couldn't possibly matter less than the ghosts crowding his office. Across the reservation, Olivia sat on her cabin porch, Sarah's letter open in her trembling hands. Medical updates mostly, none of them good. The cancer had spread faster than expected. The doctors were adjusting their timeline, a clinical way of saying her mother was dying more quickly than predicted. Shadow whined softly, resting his muzzle on Olivia's knee. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her shirt pocket, and buried her face in the dog's thick fur. "We should be there," she whispered, "but she made me promise to finish this first." The sound of approaching footsteps brought her head up sharply. Michael Running Eagle stood at the edge of her property, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "My niece," he said, the acknowledgement lacking any familial warmth. "I thought we should speak privately," Shadow growled low in his throat. Sensing Olivia's instant tension, she laid a restraining hand on the dog's neck. "Not sure we have anything to discuss," she replied evenly. Michael stepped closer, stopping when Shadow's growl intensified. "John may have acknowledged your bloodline, but that doesn't make you Lakota. It doesn't make you one of us." "Never claimed it did. Then why are you here? What do you want from us?" Michael's voice remained controlled, but anger simmered beneath the surface. Olivia stood, shadow rising with her. I want what was taken from me. A father, a heritage, the truth. The truth, Michael repeated, a bitter smile twisting his features. The truth is that John made a choice. The tribe over a white woman. It was the right choice then, and it remains the right choice now. Is that why you're here, to defend my father's abandonment? Michael's laugh was cold. I'm here to offer you a solution that benefits us both. The tribal council controls a discretionary fund. I can arrange for a substantial payment, enough to care for your mother's medical needs, enough to start fresh somewhere else. Olivia's eyes narrowed. You're trying to buy me off. I am offering you something more valuable than John's belated guilt. I'm offering you a chance to help Sarah, while there's still time. The mention of her mother's name from Michael's lips sent a chill through Olivia. Don't speak about her, she warned, her voice dropping dangerously. You have no right. Michael shrugged, unperturbed. Consider my offer. When John steps down, and he will, sooner rather than later, things will change here. The old ways are dying. Progress is coming. Those who stand in its path will be forgotten. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and if you're curious about where your father was during your childhood, you might ask him about the monthly payments sent to a certain bank account in Missoula. 15 years of reliable deposits until they suddenly stopped 3 years ago. His smile was venomous. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say? Right around when you enlisted. Michael walked away, leaving Olivia staring after him, her world tilting off its axis once again. The next morning dawned gray and threatening, heavy clouds pressing down on the mountains. John arrived at the training center earlier than usual, driven by restlessness and unresolved questions. He found Olivia already there, working with a young German shepherd puppy in the indoor arena. He watched silently from the doorway, struck by how naturally she handled the animal. Shadow lay nearby, attentive but relaxed, occasionally offering a calming presence when the puppy became too excited. You're good with them, John said finally, announcing his presence. Better than most trainers I've seen. Olivia didn't look up. Mom couldn't afford a dog when I was young. I used to volunteer at shelters just to be around them. John moved closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Your mother? How is she now? Olivia did look at him then, her expression guarded. Dying more quickly than the doctors expected. The bluntness of her reply hit John like a physical blow. He had prepared himself for many versions of this conversation, but the stark reality of Sarah's imminent death left him momentarily speechless. I should be with her, Olivia continued, turning back to the puppy. She made me promise to stay until I found answers, until I found Shadow. She glanced up again, her eyes accusing. Joseph says you've been sending her money for 15 years. Is that true? John exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of secrets long kept. Yes, it was the least I could do. I couldn't face her, but I couldn't abandon her completely either. But you could abandon me, Olivia said flatly. John flinched. It wasn't that simple. It seems pretty simple from where I'm standing, Olivia replied. You chose your tribe over your family, monthly payments to ease your conscience. I chose wrong, John admitted, the words like stones in his throat. I've spent 28 years knowing I chose wrong. Olivia gathered the puppy into her arms, its small body wriggling with excitement. Then why did the payments stop 3 years ago? Right when I enlisted, Michael made sure to mention that timing. John's expression darkened. Michael needs to mind his own business. Answer the question. John moved to a nearby bench and sat heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. The payment stopped because Sarah asked me to stop. She called me for the first time in decades, told me you had enlisted, that you were following in my footsteps without even knowing it. His voice grew rough with emotion. She said she wouldn't take my money anymore, said it was time I faced what I'd done. Olivia regarded him silently, weighing his words. I tried to find you then, John continued. Called in favors with military contacts, but you were already deployed. Then I lost track until I saw that television segment with Shadow. John nodded. I thought he might bring you here eventually. I thought it might be a way to finally face you. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she held out the puppy to John. Here, he needs to get used to different handlers. John hesitated, then carefully took the squirming animal. Their fingers brushed briefly in the exchange. The first physical contact between father and daughter in 28 years. Neither acknowledged it, but both felt the jolt of connection. What was she like? Olivia asked suddenly. When you knew her, before me. The question caught John off guard. He looked down at the puppy now contentedly settling in his lap. She was fearless, smart, stubborn as hell. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She pulled me out of a crevasse during the worst blizzard in 20 years, broke protocol, risked her own life. When I asked her why, she said she'd never learned to follow stupid rules. Olivia's expression softened slightly. That sounds like her. She loved thunderstorms. John continued, memories spilling out now. She used to drag me outside to watch them roll in over the mountains, said it was the earth and sky arguing, and we were privileged to witness it. He stroked the puppy absently. She had the most amazing laugh, like music. She doesn't laugh much anymore, Olivia said quietly. The simple statement hung between them, heavy with all it implied. Before John could respond, Ben Black Wolf burst into the arena, his expression urgent. Chief, we have a situation. Michael's called an emergency council meeting. He's pushing for a vote of no confidence. John handed the puppy back to Olivia and stood. On what grounds? He's claiming financial irregularities. Says you've been diverting tribal funds for personal use. Ben glanced uncomfortably at Olivia. He's using the payments to Sarah Whitefeather as evidence. John's face hardened. Those were my personal funds, not tribal money. Maybe so, but he's got council members questioning everything now, and he's brought in outside developers again. The same ones who wanted to build that resort casino last year. They're offering triple what we rejected then. John turned to Olivia, conflict evident in his features. I have to deal with this. She nodded shortly. Go. This isn't my fight. But as John hurried away with Ben, Olivia found herself wondering if that was truly the case. The training center had become a refuge in the short time she'd been there, a place where her skills mattered, where she could work through her own trauma while helping damaged animals heal. If Michael succeeded in ousting John and selling reservation land to developers, what would happen to the center, to the dogs, to Shadow? The thought of losing this newfound sanctuary sent a wave of unexpected panic through her. She placed the puppy back in its enclosure and whistled for Shadow. Come on. Boy, I think we need to learn more about tribal politics. Later that afternoon, Olivia stood at the back of the packed council meeting. Shadow pressed against her leg. The atmosphere was tense. Voices raised in passionate argument. Michael stood at the center, his presentation slick and rehearsed. The training center loses money every year. he was saying, gesturing to projected figures on a screen. The resort developers are offering us a chance to turn a financial drain into a major source of revenue. Jobs for our people. Education funds for our children. At what cost? Grace. Many horses challenged from her seat at the council table. Our heritage is not for sale. Michael Running Eagle. Our heritage won't feed hungry families. Michael countered smoothly. And can we trust the current leadership to make these decisions? John has demonstrated questionable judgment, using tribal position to hide personal indiscretions, sending reservation money off reservation for decades. John stood, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Those payments came from my personal accounts, not tribal funds. I have the bank records to prove it. Convenient records that suddenly appear when questioned, Michael retorted. And what about the military dog? Purchased with whose authority? Whose money? Before John could respond, Olivia stepped forward, her military bearing commanding instant attention. Shadow moved with her, his presence adding weight to her advance. "If I may address the council," she said, her voice clear and steady. Grace nodded permission, ignoring Michael's scowl of disapproval. "My name is Sergeant Olivia Whitefeather. I served with the 75th Ranger Regiment in Afghanistan. 3 years ago, my unit was ambushed. 3 of my team members died. Shadow and I survived because of each other." She placed her hand on the dog's head. "When I was evacuated with injuries, Shadow was reassigned. He became aggressive, unmanageable. Military handlers couldn't work with him because his trauma was too severe." She paused, making eye contact with various council members. Chief Running Eagle didn't purchase Shadow with tribal funds. He used his own savings, money he'd set aside for his retirement. I know this because I obtained the purchase records from the Pentagon before coming here. A surprised murmur ran through the room. John looked equally startled. "As for why he bought Shadow," Olivia continued, "you'll have to ask him. But I can tell you this, that dog has saved more lives than most people in this room. He deserves respect, not to be used as a political weapon." She reached into her pocket and removed a folded paper, holding it up. "This is a letter from the Department of Defense confirming that Shadow was purchased privately by John Running Eagle for the purpose of rehabilitation. There was no tribal involvement." Michael's face darkened with anger. "This doesn't change the financial reality of the training center. It doesn't address the leadership questions." "No," Olivia agreed calmly. "But it does address the question of integrity. And before this council votes on anything, I think they deserve all the facts, not just the ones that serve your agenda." The room erupted in voices, some supportive, others questioning. As Olivia turned to leave, her eyes met John's across the crowded space. In his gaze, she saw something unexpected: pride. She stepped outside into the crisp evening air, Shadow at her side, feeling strangely lighter. The fight wasn't over, far from it, but for the first time, she had spoken not just as Olivia Whitefeather, but as her father's daughter. The revelation surprised her nearly as much as it seemed to surprise John. The tribal council meeting had adjourned in disarray with no vote taken, and tensions running high throughout the reservation. John found Olivia at the training center's back paddock, where she worked methodically with Shadow and 3 other dogs, running them through advanced obedience drills. She moved with quiet confidence, her commands barely above a whisper. Yet each animal responded instantly. John leaned against the fence, watching. In her movements, he saw echoes of his own training methods, techniques he'd developed over decades of working with difficult cases. But there was something else, too, something uniquely hers, a gentle persistence that came from understanding trauma from the inside out. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally, breaking the silence between them. "Stand up for me in there." Olivia didn't look up from the dogs. "I wasn't standing up for you. I was standing up for the truth. Either way, I'm grateful." John hesitated. Michael has been pushing for that casino development for years. He believes modernization is the only way forward for the tribe. "And you don't?" "I believe we need to find our own path, not just imitate what's destroyed other nations." John moved closer, entering the paddock carefully. Shadow watched him but remained at Olivia's side. "The training center represents something important. Our traditional connection to animals, adapted for today's world. It might not be profitable in dollars, but there are other kinds of wealth." Olivia signaled the dogs to stay, then turned to face John directly. "Noble sentiments, but sentiment doesn't pay bills." "No, it doesn't," John acknowledged with a slight nod. "That's why I've been looking for alternatives. Government contracts for service dogs, training programs for veterans." He paused. "Your intervention at the council bought us time. But Michael won't stop. He's convinced the old ways, my ways, are holding the tribe back." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "You know, I could help with those veteran programs. I have connections, experience." She looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "If I were staying, that is—" John felt a surge of hope at her words. "Are you staying?" "I don't know," she admitted. "That depends on a lot of things." Before John could respond, his phone rang. He answered, his expression growing grave with each passing moment. When he hung up, he looked at Olivia with a mixture of sadness and urgency. "It's your mother. The hospital called. We need to go now." They raced to the small regional hospital, the 3-hour drive passing in tense silence. Shadow lay in the back seat, sensitive to the emotional currents filling the vehicle. When they arrived, a nurse led them directly to Sarah's room, her grave expression telling them everything they needed to know. Sarah Whitefeather lay propped against pillows, her once vibrant red hair now gray and thin, her skin almost translucent, IV lines snaked from her arms, and an oxygen cannula looped beneath her nose, but her eyes, those remarkable green eyes that had captivated John from their first meeting, were unchanged, still bright with intelligence and determination. "You came," she whispered, her gaze moving from John to Olivia, and finally to Shadow. "All of you came." As Shadow gently placed his muzzle on the edge of the bed, Sarah smiled. "My family," she said. "Together at last. For those of us who've lived past our 55th year, we understand that time doesn't heal all wounds. It merely teaches us which ones we can bear to live with." The story of John and Olivia reminds us that it's never too late to reach across the chasms we've created in our families. Many of us carry regrets like stones in our pockets, the child we didn't support, the parent we didn't reconcile with, the words left unspoken until it was too late. We tell ourselves there's always tomorrow, until suddenly there isn't. Sarah's quiet strength echoes our own unwritten thoughts, the private aches we hide from the world, the memories we protect even as they wound us. Perhaps the most powerful gift we can give ourselves in our later years isn't financial security or physical comfort, but the courage to heal what still can be healed, to reach out while there's still time to say, "I was wrong," or "I forgive you," before the opportunity slips away forever. Our mistakes don't have to be our final legacy. Like Shadow finding his way back to Olivia, we too can find our way back to what matters most, if we're brave enough to try. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.